All right, welcome. This is TRiRODS for December 2020. We have two in-house experts today sharing some new work from Rincy and the iRODS Consortium. This is going to be Jason Coposky talking about the C++ REST API that he's made. And then Bo Zhou from Rincy also is going to talk about the zone management tool, an administrative interface that he's been building on top of the C++ REST API. Take it away.
All right, thank you, Terrell. Just a quick introduction for those who may not know. So the iRODS Consortium is a sustainability effort that is wrapped around iRODS as an open source data management middleware. We are housed at the Renaissance Computing Institute, which is an applied research institute out of UNC Chapel Hill, and effectively do business as the university. We're comprised of nearly 30 members at this point, which includes enterprise customers such as Bayer, down to research institutes such as the Wellcome Sanger Institute, as well as many institutes around the world. And that includes a number of storage vendors as well, such as Western Digital, NetApp, DDN, and so on. So every one of our members helps sustain this software with a yearly contribution. So today we're going to be talking about our REST API that we've been working on for about the past year or so, sort of in the background. And the motivation here is to create something that is simple to use, easy to deploy, and fast and lightweight that is going to sit directly on top of iRODS. So this is based on the C++ API and is a very thin layer sitting on top, directly on top of iRODS itself. So this is going to act as a proxy mid-tier application layer, which means effectively the REST API acts as a proxy client to the iRODS server itself. And this is all based on token-based authentication and authorization. So we're using JSON web tokens for shipping all of the relevant information back and forth between the client side and the REST API layer. So when deployed, this provides a single executable per endpoint, which is effectively suitable for containerized deployments. So every endpoint, the auth, the admin endpoint or whatever is its own single executable that could be potentially packaged up into a container and then deployed into Docker Swarm or Kubernetes or perhaps any one of your clouds as well. And this gives you the ability and the flexibility to deploy what you want, where you want it, when you want it. There we go. So once you've installed the package, which will install all of the endpoints by default, we will then be able to proxy every one of those endpoints with something like Nginx. So the idea here is that every endpoint operates with its own port, which is configured. And then from there, if you want to bundle all of those different services behind, say, port 80, you could run Nginx to do that. So we provide some templates out of the box that'll make this easy for you. The first of which is the iRODS client REST JSON configuration file, which we'll take a look at next. That is deployed as a template file, and you as an administrator will simply copy that to Etsy iRODS, and then from there edit accordingly. You may not like the default port ranges we chose, so we've externalized all of that in this configuration file. Now beyond that, we also have an example configuration template here for Nginx, and this you would simply copy to Etsy Nginx sites available, and once that's edited accordingly, you would then link that to sites enabled and then restart both services, which would make both of those services immediately available. So if we look at the client configuration here, each endpoint is named accordingly based on the endpoint executable itself. And then from there, we expose the port, the number of threads. So you could dedicate any number of cores to any one of these endpoints, depending on what you expect your load to be for any one of these particular services. And then a timeout in seconds for the client side. So once a connection has been made by the mid-tier here, there will be an associated timeout for that particular connection to iRODS in order to keep the load on the server light and all those different high-level ports available. On the other side of that, if we take a look at the Nginx configuration, we have a basic reverse proxy set up here. So every one of these particular endpoints, every one of these paths are effectively mapped to one of these ports, which are also corresponding into the service configuration file itself that we just took a look at. So if we look at access here, that's going to be on port 8080. And if we looked at the previous configuration file, that would of course also say port 8080. We've provided some various methods here that will allow us to get through the reverse proxy, as well as the headers. These could be tightened up depending on what your particular requirements are. This was effectively just given as vanilla as possible to make it easy to deploy and easy to run. If you're going to take it out into production, then site administrators can make their choices accordingly. When using this as an endpoint or as a service here, the first thing that we're going to need to do is authenticate. So this is effectively going to authenticate against iRODS as a client, as I'd mentioned, and we're going to use JSON Web Tokens to pass all this information around. So this web token is going to contain the user's identity. It's going to contain the authentication information, your passwords and whatnot, your authorization, as well as any potential future-based role information as this package or this set of services mature. So you're going to effectively need to hit the auth endpoint from there with all of the appropriate parameters, at which point that will generate a JSON Web Token and return that back to the client. And then from there, you're going to use that as your authorization header down here at the bottom for all of your subsequent calls to the various other REST endpoints, which we'll take a look at next. We will start with the access endpoint here. So this is effectively a ticket generation service. Given a particular logical path, be that either a collection or a data object, you can generate a ticket in order to access this particular information or in order to share that with another user. You can generate a ticket, provide that ticket information to another user, and they, of course, could then access the particular data. So we're going to post to this endpoint, and all you need to provide is a path that is URL encoded for this particular collection or data object. And also, of course, as I mentioned, include the authorization header here with the token. And then from there, this is going to return a bit of JSON, which is going to include an XAPI key, and then a URL, which you can use to access that particular data object. So as a client, when you're developing something for these particular services, the ultimate goal here is to provide as much information back to the user to make using that client as easy as possible. We don't want the clients to be building URLs on the client side, with all of the various tenant slashes and endpoints and whatnot. When requested, we're going to provide as much information as possible to make this as accessible and easy to use. Of interest, especially to the zone administration tool here, or the zone management tool, is the administration endpoint, which effectively services the same thing that the iadmin command would access here. And on a post, we can select an action, and this action is going to be add, modify, or remove. We're going to specify a target. So this could be any noun within the system. So this could be a user, it could be a zone, the zone, a resource, or any of the other admin style commands that we're used to from, that just help text as the target. So we have an action, we have a target, and then things become a bit more amorphous here, where the second argument here is going to be either a username or the resource name, depending on the value of the action and the target. And the rest of these basically explode into a combinatoric mess, depending on how you're going to be using this. And we'll have to reference other documentation in order to completely exhaust all the options here. But as an example here, we could look at this. We can add a resource with a name of UFS 0. It's going to be of type Unix file system. Its vault path is going to be temp iRODS UFS 0, and arg5 and 6. arg5 is empty and arg6 is the zone name. So ultimately, this is the exact same information we will be providing the iadmin command, but wrapped in a JSON endpoint here. And either you're going to get an exception because something went wrong, or you're just going to get success as the output of that command. And then, of course, you could just run ILS-REST if you were at the command line in order to see the results of the success of this particular endpoint. So as we had mentioned, we have an auth endpoint as well, which we sort of predicated here a little bit. So this is how you effectively generate that JSON Web Token. And ultimately, the two parameters that we're going to have here is the user's password and the user's auth type. So I'm sorry, username is missing here as well. So that is an omission here. So we're going to hit the auth endpoint. We have a username of RODS, and of course we have a password of RODS, and the auth type is going to be native. Currently, only the native iRODS authentication is supported because we're going to need additional plumbing for something like Kerberos or GSI, which is all certificate based, and there's not a lot of information exchange over the command line when authenticating with those particular flavors. OpenID is going to be of great interest to us in the future, and that is getting driven through the authentication working group within the consortium. So we'll be looking very much forward to plumbing that through the various web interfaces as well as the REST interface. When this is successful, you're going to get basically the raw encrypted JSON web token as the output of this particular operation, which is why you can see we effectively just assign that to the token variable at the command line here, on which all of these other examples rely. We have a list endpoint, so this is effectively ILS, but for a REST endpoint. And from there, we're going to provide a path, which is once again URL encoded. So we're not managing any of that for you. You're going to have to URL encode all of your paths. We have a stat operation here, so you can pass a Boolean flag to request stat information back with every one of these particular objects, as well as permissions. So if you want to get the access control list, any associated metadata with any of these particular objects or collections. You can offset, so if you want to implement pagination on the client side, or you can limit the number of records depending on how you're implementing that. So if you only want 10 at a time to for your web application on your phone, for instance. And all of this is effectively encoded in the URL as well. And when you get back, what you get returned is effectively a list of all of the potential operations organized in a JSON object. Sorry, here it is. So ultimately here, we're going to get this JSON object back, which is going to have your logical path, a type associated with it, and had requested any of that other particular information here. There would be metadata, there would be the access control list, there would be the various stat information that would not fit on the screen. So we have truncated that a little bit. But the most important part, I think, to take away here is this particular links results. You'll see that the first URL in this particular listing is going to be here. The last particular URL is going to be listed, as well as the next page, the previous page, and a link to this current page. All of this information is encoded in the results, which is going to give the clients as much information as possible to react without having to build any of this. So when you start paginating a collection through this list, you're going to be provided everything that you need here in order to do that. So you fetch the next page, these URLs are going to change, and then this current page is going to become self, and the next page is going to be available. So from the client side, it's very easy to start working with this thing as quickly as possible. We have a stream operation, so we can list all of the data objects and collections, and we have the ability to put and get data as well. So you can stream data into and out of iRODS using this particular endpoint using put and get. And ultimately, all you need is the path and offset into that data object so you can get the next chunk of data, assuming that it is potentially very large. And then you can limit the number of bytes to read. And either you're just doing a put here or a get here, depending on how you're interacting with this endpoint, of course, with your authorization token. And then you just provide the associated parameters. On put, you're going to get no results, or you're going to get an exception if something terrible happens. On a get, the requested data is returned as part of the body of the response. So this is very simple to use. If, for instance, you wanted to implement a parallel transfer upload or download, you would just simply start multiple processes with the appropriate offsets into or out of that particular data object and start streaming data into and out of that data object. I should have probably mentioned that this repository and package also comes with a Python client that was written to interact with this. So it gives us a very easy way to exercise, and was actually developed in order to test this. But it would also, help any new developers who wanted to bootstrap getting familiar with this particular API. And the last endpoint that we have is the zone report. A zone report within iRODS is a API that gives you all of the potential configuration information for the entire zone. So If you have 300 servers, you're going to get a giant JSON zone report back that happens to have 300 servers worth of information packed into that. And this is what we're using to actually drive the zone management tool, where we can introspect into the system itself and then use all that information from an administrative point of view. So on a post, effectively, we're just going to request the zone report. And as I said, that is coming back in JSON. So in the example, we pipe that through JQ to make it human readable. And then the body of that is effectively a giant JSON object, which includes all of the servers and all of the zones configured for this particular deployment. If you are federated with other zones, you're going to get some of that zone information as well in this particular zone report, which would then allow the administration tool to have some introspection into your federated zones. Let's say if you're in a federation hub sort of deployment, or topology for that matter. So that is the end of the REST API. If anyone has any questions, we'll take questions regarding that, and then we can talk about the zone management tool.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The pagination, like the /list command, is paging stateful like across requests, or
No,
can the results change?
So the pagination is not atomic. As a REST API, it can be.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't maintain state on the REST side of things in order to like hold that connection open. So when you offset effectively, the endpoint has to fast forward through everything, which makes that's definitely a performance hit there.
Okay, and so that means the objects that are in that list, when you page, they can potentially change, the order can be different too, right?
Yes, absolutely. So if someone deleted a data object out of a collection while you were paging through that data object may disappear, even though you started paging that collection before that data object was removed.
Okay, thanks.
Let's see, does the authentication support HTTP basic auth as well? So we would have to talk about what that means in the context of basic auth and iRODS, Leon. Can you explain a little bit, like how you feel those two things fit together?
I may not understood how the authentication performed in the RESTful service, but basically the HTTP basic authentication uses the HTTP headers, not the URL. But when I see your the authentication URL, the password is passed through the URL, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we can certainly move that into the headers for basic auth. I mean, this is as of yet unreleased, so we're just getting this bootstrapped. So.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
How linked is this to the version of iRODS it runs on? Can you have multiple versions of it and/or one version support multiple versions of iRODS? This is a C client to iRODS, so this is as coupled to iRODS as the I commands are, John. I mean, it's effectively the exact same thing. We are making all of the exact same calls under the covers that any of the I commands would, like ILS or any of the queries or whatnot.
Is it in fact as coupled though? I mean, you could point this at a different version of iRODS.
But it's linked against a version of iRODS.
Okay, because it's built through the same dev package.
It is built through the exact same development package.
Okay.
It uses all the exact same client-side commands under the covers.
Okay. And then when you configure it, you point it at a particular zone. So it's not quite like Cloud Browser where you could type in the zone name and give it, just point it anywhere. This will be an administrative tool that is deployed for a particular zone by that zone's administrator.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, the jargon is the client for the Cloud Browser. The jargon, the giant jargon mid-tier. And so, it may have been a bit more abstracted from the underlying implementation. But we could build this against 4.7, 427, for instance, and then run it against 427, because ultimately what we're using are the, very low level C client calls. So
Right.
we could build a 4.2.7 version, we could build a 4.3 version, and there's nothing stopping us from that, and then point them at those separate zones. Things once again get weird if you're pointing a 4.3 version of a client against a 4.2.8 version of the 4.2.8 version of the server. Are there bulk add options for both object and metadata? I do not believe that we added atomic metadata to the stream endpoint yet, but we could certainly do that. I don't know what you mean by bulk add for object, though. You mean bundling a bunch of objects together into a blob and then uploading it?
No, I was thinking more that one of the slow things of adding to iRODS kind of could be setting up a connection each time. So if you're doing lots of iPuts, then each time you have to do a separate kind of iPut and stuff like that. That's why sometimes you have things like Baton, where you can just take a stream of JSON and it just grabs the files and throws it in across the same connection. That can be interestingly desirable depending on how that ends up working.
Yeah. There are, so under the covers here, we effectively have a connection pool for every one of these endpoints. And so depending on the endpoint, it may or may not make sense to actually maintain a warm connection for a particular JSON web token. And we're still sort of, feeling the semantics out around that. So I'm really, especially for query as well as stream, maintaining a hot connection makes a lot of sense. But, like the administration endpoint, that's causing some trouble because web applications like to just, send a bunch of requests out all at the same time. And iRODS is very much not good at reusing connections. And so we're going to work out the semantics on what that means, but there's some additional flavors there, if you will. So we could, and right now this stream operation for a single token maintains a single connection through that stream endpoint. And so you're not recurring the cost of warming another connection up for every data movement.
Yeah, okay, I think.
Let's see. I think I missed a connection question in the chat here. Chris Calloway, I'm seeing the examples over HTTP and tokens are being passed. Could example Nginx configurations for HTTPS be provided, or is it a simple substitution? Yeah, moving to HTTPS with Nginx is very straightforward. That's really not a problem there. We didn't provide it because as soon as we use like HTTPS, we're going to need to then start talking about certificates and whatnot. And, that we didn't want to get into that as far as the README is concerned and all of that. We assume people can Nginx or use Nginx themselves. Let's see, next question. Can this be load balanced? Absolutely. So that's why we put a single endpoint in a single executable. So like I said, you could throw it over Kubernetes or Docker Swarm, or have 5 servers that are running all of these, and it's really assumed that this package would go right alongside of an iRODS catalog service consumer, for instance, and then you can just HA and round robin those just fine. That's assuming some configuration is identical for the zones, but it should be anyway. So load balancing and all of that, cloud deployments, that was the whole goal here to begin with. And then from there, we can, if there are no other questions about this, we can talk about the zone management tool, and I'm sure you'll have plenty more questions about that. So the zone management tool is going to be a single page application based on React and the Material UI framework. The whole point here is to give us a single pane of glass to have some introspection into your zone, based on that zone report that I mentioned earlier. So this is going to expose all of the reporting and all of the underlying machinations within every server within your zone that you are administrating. That zone report contains all of the information out of Etsy iRODS that is base 64 encoded. So we will have the opportunity to present that to you as a user and give you one place to configure all of those things. So that's a single dashboard view, and we're going to have the ability to configure both the logical as well as the physical aspects of iRODS. So the zone and the grid, if you remember those distinctions between the zone being all of the things that are logical, and the grid basically everything up to and including the configuration of the server process itself. And then also the goal here is to assume those administration duties that were baked into Metalinks in the beginning by EMC. So we want a clean separation of concerns between what the administrators are going to do and what the users are going to be doing. And we're going to take a much more enthusiastic hand and building that experience out through Metalinks as well within the collaboration within the community. And so some future work for the zone management tool is going to also include things like policy manipulation. So the policy composition things we talked about at the user group, I hope very much to see exposed through the zone management tool. Manipulating the administrative metadata on all of the different aspects of the zone itself. So if you're going to configure, let's say storage tiering, my favorite example, that's going to involve some administrative metadata that's going to be associated with the storage resources. That should be an administrative task, not necessarily a task for Metalinks. Managing your delayed execution queue. So if you're, once again, using storage tiering, you're going to have a heavily leveraged delayed execution queue. You're going to want to keep an eye on that. Administrating tickets. So, if you're using a sharing aspect, say through Metalinks, you're going to perhaps want to start revoking some old tickets or what have you, as well as various other monitoring and metrics. So things that we have demonstrated through the Elasticsearch, for instance, we can start pulling back into the zone management tool itself. But ultimately, both for, as Ilyang was saying, for the basic auth and, as well for the zone management tool, community feedback is critical for our future direction. So we need to make this useful for you. We can only do that if you are going to be, transparent with us about what you would like it to do in the future. And then from there, I'm going to stop sharing and hand this over to Bo to show you all of the amazing things he's been working on.
All right, thanks, Jason.
Yes, sir.
Can you see my screens right now? Yeah, so as Jason talked about, this application is designed and developed in React. So we choose React as a front-end framework because it is very fast, and we are hoping users to use our app in a very rapid way. And also this allows us to decrease the times of reloading, which will cost a lot of time. So let's get started and see how it works. So right now it's the login page, which uses the auth endpoints Jason discussed. It takes 2 arguments of your zone admin username and also password. So in this case, we just need RODS and RODS here, and you can click login. And if it is successful, you will receive a token, and that token will be later used in each other operations, and we will send them in a header, so it is very safe. So that is the homepage of our ZMT project. As you can see, some of the stats are shown here, letting you know how many servers, users, groups, and resources are there currently in the service. And also it lists out all the servers information in a card here, which you can just click, and that will tells you a lot of like host name and which system it is running. And you will also have the chance to know the details by clicking that details button. And from there, you will see more kind of information and configuration information there. So for example, host and how many services and the plugins, all the informations are there. So maybe you have a question of when it comes to a lot of servers, like how you can handle that. For example, if we have like hundreds of servers there, we need to have that kind of ability to handle. So we have these paginations available, which will be helpful for having a large scale application. We build that in any in some other ways as well in users and groups and also resources page, just to make sure as the skills come up, we can handle that perfectly. So let's go to the users page. And from that, you will see a list of existing users in the background. And these informations are called and fetched by using the admin and also the iQuest endpoint. So you can also add and remove, and you can also add users. So for example, if I try to add a new user, I need to provide 3 informations, which is username, zone name, and also you need to specify what kind of user type you're desiring. So in this case, I just want to choose ROS user and have a username of TRiRODS and choose the zone name of temp zone for sure. So let's click save. And in the backend, it will create a new user called TRiRODS. You can see here. So you will also have the ability to edit this user. In terms of edit, we are letting users to choose what kind of group they are wanted to have. So by default, public group is added to a user, but that is not enough. So if a user wants to add more groups, what can we do? So we built this dynamic search function there just to give user a quick and fast way to add groups to a specific user. Probably you can type in a lot of other keywords, or even it is just a number. It will tell you all the relevant results that is stored in the server. So which is very helpful for us to just add users to a group. So you can also remove a user from an existing group as well. And by means of that, we need to go to our group page. So that is a list of the groups we have right now. And if you click edit button, there's no users there. So you can add more users to this group. So let's try to add the TRiRODS users we just created. So it's there, and we can just simply click add, and it's just added to that group. And if we change our mind and we don't want TRiRODS in the test group too, we just click remove, and it's just removed from the group. So that's how we handle like adding groups, adding users to a group, or vice versa. And by having this dynamic search function, it is very helpful because, as I said before, if the scale is coming up, we need to make sure that we are able to let users to choose from hundreds of users or even maybe thousands of users. So that is a way we think might be helpful for us to achieve that goal. So that is a brief overview of the users and groups. And now let's move to the resources page. So in the resources page, you will have a list of resources, and you will know which type of resources they are running, and the zone information, is it up or is it down? So you can add resources by providing 4 parameters, as Jason discussed. We need resources name, and we need type of resource, and we need a path, and we also need a zone name. So by providing these information, you will be able to successfully create a new resources in the backend. And also, we will have a function to letting you know the details of that resources. And you can just click this little arrow button. And if you click that, it will pops up, not pops up, but a collapse, maybe fall down a area for a resources details where each specific information is stated there. And it is just very lightweight, so you can click all the resources details you wanted to know at the same time. And if you want to change some of your arguments there, you need to go to the edit resources page where you will have an opportunity to edit each of these parameters. So for example, if we are trying to change that resources content, and we can just backspace and just start typing. For example, we can just say maybe TRiRODS testing, and we can click save, and it will tell you it's updated. And if you go back to the demo resources and see the details, so it is changed. And also another kind of features we supported in the added resources page is that once you start typing, if you like mistype several letters and you don't want it, and you also like accidentally forget what like information that is correct, so you can just click reset, and that will turns you back to the origin value of these fields, which is kind of a bumper we have for users. So that is a overview for the added resources page. And we can also remove these resources as well, like the users and the groups did. That is just a start of our project. We are having a lot of other dreams and goals, but we will have to figure that out later and add more features to it. So that's an overview for the ZMT app. Back to Jason.
All right, thanks so much.
Yeah.
We have been fielding some questions in the chat, but if there's anyone else have any other questions?
Maybe you can say them out loud for the recording.
Sure, I have a question.
Yeah.
How is the tokens lifetime managed, like between the administration interface and the CVP REST API, like, and can that token expire, and are people allowed to configure token lifetime?
Yes, absolutely. So the idea here is that the JWTs themselves actually support the lifetime. And so we can make that a configurable, which would probably go in that JSON configuration. Sorry, I'm trying to find the slide deck again among all my other slides. So if we go all the way back to auth, we can, at this point of call, I'm using effectively an underlying library for building the JSON web token. One of the entries in the token itself is an expiration time. So we can export that and, put that in the JSON configuration file for every one of the endpoints, or for the auth endpoint, sorry. And then as it gets passed around, every time another endpoint is hit, the token is validated. So we unencrypt it, we validate that token against all of the credentials, and part of that validation is that expiry time. So what needs to happen next is the getting a new token, the flow for getting a new token, as I should say. So once a token is invalidated, we need to notify the client that the token's invalid. The client will then need to re-authenticate, and they will get a new token. So that is the next step along the way there. I'm sorry, I got to pull up all of my controls once again.
Cool.
So yeah, the code is in there. I just have to turn it on, and then, as I saw, I provided a URL for the client side for all of the other things they need to do, like listing and pagination. When they try to use a token, it will have to send a URL back to the client to say, hit this endpoint in order to refresh your token, and then that flow should be very quick, because they do have a good token. It's just expired. So we'll just simply generate another token with a new timestamp and a new expiry date. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. Are there any other questions? About the zone management tool or the REST API or any of that going forward? So this is as of yet unreleased. You know, as I said, we have a few things we need to do. HTTP basic auth being one of them, moving that stuff into the header with the base64 encoding and all of that. I'd hope to have OpenID ready with this to go along with the basic auth and all of that, but I'm not sure that that's going to be ready at that point. But no problem there.
So something that does occur to me with the web GUI, especially from an administration point of view, it'd be very easy to do the wrong thing. And of course, this is just as true with the I commands as anything else. But on some other web GUI interfaces, we have other things that I'm aware of, like, for example, the Arista CloudVision GUI into the switch management software. You can set up the configuration you want. And then you basically have a preview to say this is the work it's going to do, and then another button to actually go ahead and do it. And you could build this into a kind of a merge review kind of a thing, where one person says, I want to add these resources and these users, and someone else says, yes, that's the same thing to do. It's a lot more work, so I'm not necessarily saying tomorrow, but it's the kind of thing where you could have that shared responsibility for things.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Bo.
Yeah, I was just saying it's a kind of a good point for us to build this kind of dashboard applications, especially like our users might have different kind of preferences, and it's might be better for us to give users a choice to let them like configure how they want this dashboard to be behaving. So we were thinking about that before, but we haven't come up a plan yet. But that is for sure a really nice way for us to go.
Yeah, I would agree. We are building as many bumpers into this thing as possible from the client side. And we've already, tripped into some holes ourselves and had to fix the server a couple times. Changing the RODS admin flavor to RODS user, for instance, kind of broke everything else. That was a good one. Or something as simple as putting a nonsensical host name into a resource as the location just drags the server down because DNS resolution is falling over. So, building some bumpers around that would be good. I could envision, like building resource hierarchies, for instance, where we would build up stacks of effectively URL calls that would be create a number of users, add the children and all of that, and then have a big commit button. So, that could be one possibility, and that would be, one possibility for review also. But, like you said, the review is a lot more work. Took GitHub a few years to get there.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
But you can see how really nice it is. I'm sorry, I realize I've been driving in with questions, but it's all really nice work, by the way, and it looks really great. So I wanted to say that rather than just come across the bit on what about.
Oh, no worries. Let's see, Paul's asking if there's a rough timeline. I'm hoping to get the REST API out around the same time as 4.2.9. A lot of this is going to be driven by, what Bo needs to make it go, as well as our continuous integration pipeline. So this is a brand new kind of thing that we have as of yet to test in our CI, pipeline. So we're working on building a generic test the client. We don't necessarily test clients, we test servers. So we're building a new client testing sort of framework into the CI, which Dan's been working on a bit for the Python client API. The Python client API used to have its own whole separate set of, tests and frameworks and whatnot around it that someone had to sit down and run themselves. So hopefully we'll get this automated and out around the 4.2.9 timeframe.
Actually, on that note, it'd be really nice to know what the kind of roadmap is for both of these. So what's implemented now, what's planned to be implemented, that kind of a thing. I think one of the things around the API, for example, was whether it could do metadata commits. I'm not sure it can at the moment. So, I'm not asking for timelines necessarily, but, the kind of steps you're looking to work on.
Yeah, the two things that are in the pipeline for this, and I didn't really do a future work part, from an iRODS perspective, is metadata manipulation and access control manipulation. Those are the two big things that are missing. And then from just a REST technology point of view, we've got to get the authentication tightened up and get the token refresh implemented. From there, we will have a pretty reasonable, comprehensive unit of thing. Now, we could talk about, into the future, providing some sort of like multi-part implementation as well, much like S3 provides. So if this can grow in the direction of providing some basic S3 gateway services, that would also be kind of interesting to me, but that's definitely a lot more work than what we got right now.
And what are the plans for packaging this? Is this something you will need to download and build yourself, or what are the plans for both of these to be packaged in some way?
If it's released, it's going to be available as RPM and deb on our packages.irods.org. I mean, it has to go through CI, and then it gets deployed to the package repository, and that has all of the endpoints, the template files, and all of the other machinery around that. So, and that's how we deployed it for Bo and Amazon. So it's running, on running on the computer that Bo's talking to for the demo. So.
Jason, I was wondering with regard to the REST API. If I apologize, if covered this and I missed it, I apologize. But how easy is it to extend for, say, someone has written an informational microservice they're running on their server, or they're running indexing, or an API plugin that's new and the REST doesn't interface with it yet? Can it be extended easily?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the whole goal of the system. Since it's a single executable, I can show you the code. Effectively, you have to just add another top level executable. Let me just get into the repository here. So those slides basically came out of the README that is provided with the repository. So all of those endpoints are documented right down here the exact same way. So if you want, when I'm testing things, I copy and paste the examples from here straight into the command line. You'll see every one of those APIs has a top level server. And then they basically have an implementation in the API here. So if we go in, you'll see that every one of these has their own implementation in here. And then effectively these guys just talk to, let me see, the good stuff. And the good stuff is all templated out. So this is a system called Pistache.io, Pistachio, clever. And I've used that to provide the HTTP part. And then from there, I've just bolted on a very generic implementation of iRODS. So if we go to this implementation and I look at the auth implementation, where did it go? You'll see here that effectively it just has this macro iRODS auth API implementation in here. This is where all the magic happens. So the rest of this is effectively just boilerplate. Now, speaking of the good stuff, I have the iRODS specific implementation in here that effectively is used to generate that template. So if I go to the auth in here again, connection pool access, there's an API base class, auth API. Here's the macro, and the macro follows the exact same pattern as everything else. And then we have a namespace, and we provide a service name, which is how we're getting the things out of the configuration and whatnot. And then from there, effectively, we just have this operator, which is called right up here in the macro. Okay, so this is the operator. The macro is bolted into Pistachio. We have a solid separation of concerns between the HTTP representation and the underlying iRODS implementation. And then here's all the good stuff. So we pull the zone key out of the configuration, and we use that zone key to encrypt the token. That is how we know that the token is good, because we can actually, in fact, get something useful back. So we create a JOT of type JSON Web Services. We have an issuer claim, the subject claim, the audience claim, set not before. Here is our here's our timing, Corey, you were asking. And then here's the expiry that we have yet to turn on. We can't turn that on until we have the token refresh implemented. And then from there, we set the payload claim, which is the username. And so that's how we know in the subsequent API calls who to proxy as. We have a valid token that is issued that can be decrypted and then it's verified. And then from there, we sign this thing using a 256 encryption algorithm, sorry. And then from there, we basically just return HTTP OK, or we generate an error and then ship that back out to Pistache that goes all the way back out to the users. So if you have an endpoint that you want to support, effectively, you would build one of these APIs right off the base class, and then just add the Pistache plumbing at the top level and then stick them together. Everything else is effectively just iRODS under the covers. My favorite part is this one here. So if we're looking at the streaming code, effectively, ultimately, this is just dstream. I'm literally just opening a JSON or a iRODS object with dstream and then packaging that up and then shipping it back over the HTTP body. So this is all it takes to get data out of as far as the REST implementation is concerned.
And you said each one of these new endpoints is its own separate executable that runs.
Yes.
I guess it runs where the plugin is installed.
Well, there are no plugins.
Oh
So
wait, I thought
every one of these is a standard executable, and so if you like did a sudo service iRODS client, CPP REST status, you would see a list of like 8 different executables or 8 different services running.
Oh,
and so the goal is ultimately to be able to package every one of these up into a super tiny Docker container and then, send them on their way. And so you can set up your pods and your, replication sets and all that other fun, Kubernetes type stuff. And, just let it all go.
I believe I was thinking that the REST API itself is a plugin. Is that not so?
No, I mean, it is implemented not as a plugin, but it's implemented with a solid separation of concerns between the interface, which is the HTTP layer, and the implementation, which is the iRODS layer.
Which is a client that speaks to the server.
Yes, all of this is a client.
Yeah.
Let's see if we want. I mean, if we do want to get deep, we can take a look at the base class here, and the base class has a configuration class here, and then the API base has its own connection pool. So that's where the iRODS connections are coming from, and that connection pool is indexed based on those JSON web tokens. So they're reusable and kept hot, and they expire after 10 seconds. And then if you show up with another JOT and it doesn't have an index, it gives you, it's not indexed, it gives you another connection. So, all of this is baked in under the, with connection handle and whatnot, all serving as a abstraction around the iRODS connection itself. So all that's provided by the base class. So the rest of this is, very straightforward, as I said, to extend. So we can add metadata, we can add ACLs, we could add, the ability to run a rule remotely, for instance, the iRule endpoint, if you will. And, all of those are basically just plumbing it directly into the existing iRODS client side. Are there any more questions? I perhaps delved a little too deep on that one. Okay, well, we've got 2 minutes left. So if anyone has any more questions, throw them into the chat here, or we can get our 2 minutes back. I know it's a bit later on the far side of the water. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And we'll look forward to getting this out in the wild so you can play with it as quickly as possible.